Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. So today I wanted to talk about Rook Pair or double Rooks or whatever you want to call it. Basically when you and your opponent have two Rooks. Now the most important thing in these endgames is to know that these two Rooks have to work together. And they can either be doubled, like you can see here, White's Rooks are doubled, and they control less squares, but with a bigger force of course. You can imagine a black pawn being here would be attacked very hard by these two rooks because they're connected. And the second option is of course for the rooks to be non-connected. As you can see here, black's rooks aren't connected like white's are, which means they control more squares on the board but with less power. Now, both options are of course seen in a lot of games, and choosing between those two options of course depends on a position. Now, okay, I want to show you my game that I played, I don't know, on a tournament around a half a year ago, and I was white. As you can see, we have double rooks here, and our opponent also. Now, as you probably noticed, he's a pawn ahead, and if he manages to defend his position properly and just put this rook behind the pawn and start pushing the pawn, then of course this is going to be dangerous for me. And remember what we said earlier? Rooks must work together. And if I make my rooks work together and make active play, he will be the one struggling in this game. So guys, pause the video and think about what would you play here with white. Now as you know, rooks belong to the 7th rank. We know that even one rook on the 7th rank is very powerful, but what happens when there are two rooks on the 7th rank? Well, I gotta tell you my friend, it's gonna be a very big destruction. Rook to d7, this perfect move here, is actually a very active move which you should play in your game. Now what is the problem? Black of course also wants to play his rook to the 2nd rank. This is basically my 7th rank, but okay, he's black, so it's the same, but it's the 2nd rank for him. He wants to go there, of course. You can see that he just wants to eat all my pawns, and you know, my king would be in danger also. But I have my little trap with rook to d7, and this is rook to c8, which is going to be mate. So here, rooks are working together and they're not connected, as you can see. This rook is preventing the king from going away, so I can deliver a checkmate. Okay, so this doesn't work, as we saw, rook to e2. So he has to play something else. And he saw that if he just does nothing, then I'm just going to play rook to c7. And now how is he going to defend on the 7th rank? These two rooks are now connected, and like we said, they're controlling less squares, but with a bigger force. So a lone king isn't enough to protect these pawns here. And he's gonna be in trouble. He can't do anything. If he plays this, then he's even going to get checkmated. You can see that this is a beautiful checkmate here. But okay, that's why he's not going to play a5. But what he played instead is king to h8. He realized that he's in danger because my rooks are going to be too active and the teamwork is going to destroy him. So now I of course played my other rook to the 7th rank, and he has to defend with rook to g8. Really passively defending, but I mean, what can he do? That's his only option. Now it's clear that he can't move the rook away when my rooks are on the 7th rank, but my rooks can move wherever they want on the 7th rank. Okay, maybe not here, but okay. So this extra pawn here is not such a big deal here, because my rooks are activated and there's no chance for him of, promoting this pawn. So that's why this is an easy draw for me. Here I played h4. My plan was basically to play h5 and h6, which would be okay. I'll show you in the next example, but okay, he just played h6 to stop it, and I just played rook to a7, attacking the pawn, and here we agreed to a draw. Okay, so let me just show you what I meant by pushing this pawn. If I had my pawn on h5 in this position, it's actually the same position as here, but with a pawn on the h5 square. Now my idea was to again play rook to d7, activating my rooks, putting them on the 7th rank of course. And when he plays the same thing, if he does, I just play my rook here, and he plays his rook here, and my idea was to play h6. This would be a very crushing move, because if he takes my pawn, then this is checkmate in one move. If he moves the pawn, again, checkmate in one move. My rooks are too powerful when they're working together. So what can he do here? Basically nothing. Because, okay, he does something. Okay, this is just terrible. Man, this is too satisfying. Oh my god. I can't look at this. So this is too good. But the problem is that in this position here, he can actually also like just play h6 and the computer says it's a draw. Okay, probably because of this move here. Uh, he also activates on the 2nd rank, and then I give him the perpetual, and that's probably why this is a draw. But you get the idea. Rooks have to work together. Okay, let me show you another example that I made up. And this basically came to my mind when I was thinking about this topic. And I think that the advantage or disadvantage for you in these endgames could also be choosing when to exchange one pair of rooks and which one to exchange. Now let's take a look what I wanted to say. In this position, for example, if you play rook to b8, and just for purpose of explaining what I meant, if black takes your rook on b8, you have two options of taking the rook. Now which rook to take is usually very important, because you want to take the rook from where your rook is going to be more active. In this position, which rook should you take? Well, I hope that you set the rook on a4 because it's really obvious. From there, your rook still attacks the pawn on c4, so black has to protect it. This is the only square from where he can protect it. And now you're going to come with your king here and take the pawn. Now your move here is probably king to e4, black does something, and you just come for this pawn and win the game. So that's why you took the rook here on a4. If you took the rook on b8, now this is a mistake, because he is just going to attack your pawn here on c3 and you just screw it up. You can't protect this pawn with a king and not with a rook. So you're basically going to lose it. You play something, he takes your pawn, and this is of course not what you want. So that's also one thing that I wanted to mention here in these endgames, the importance of choosing which rook to take. So remember, in rook pair endgames, if your rooks are working together, they're just like machines, and they could be really unstoppable, especially on the 7th or on the 2nd rank. Okay, so with all that being said, the last thing I want to do in today's video is I want to go over a game that was recommended in the previous video, which was about the minority attack, if you remember. And it's basically how to defend, how to counter the minority attack. And of course, thank you for the suggestion. It's a pretty interesting game. Okay, so let's just take a look at it. The opening was actually Queen's Gambit. I don't know the opening theory for this one because I never go into these variations. But even though I don't meet them, it usually doesn't hurt to know also the opening theory of the openings that you don't play. But anyways, these are just some opening moves here. And now we can already see our Carlsbad pawn structure. White is going to play e3 and we're gonna have it here. So okay, white just developed his bishop, pinned the knight to a queen, black played bishop to e7, breaking that pin, queen to c2, g6, preparing to develop the bishop and attack the queen. So after e3 we can see bishop to f5. The most reasonable thing to do is to just block the attack with bishop to d3 and we can see the exchange. Okay, so the development continues with knight to d7, and now we can see bishop to h6, preventing black from castling, which is, I don't know, a bit strange because black can just play knight to g5, or I mean knight to g4, and attack the bishop, which has to move again. So I'm not sure if bishop to h6 was the best move, but anyways, now black can castle, and white also. And now black gets his rook to this e file, which is, as you know, important in this pawn structure for black. If you don't know, please check out the previous video. But okay, now we can see h3 attacking the knight, which moves back to f6. And it's probably going to head to this e4 square, which is the square for the knight. Okay, now we can see knight to e5, putting a knight to a pretty good square, and knight to b6. Now white plays bishop to g5, which I'm not sure if this is the best move here. But anyways, black plays knight to e4. Like we said, this is the square for the knight. Now, of course, white is going to take now the bishop. He's not going to waste any time. And now queen to c2. Now, if you're wondering why white didn't take the knight here and win the pawn, it's because of this move here. F6 winning the knight, so he can't do this. That's why he just moved his queen to c2. And now we can see knight to d6. Now white wants to trade one pair of knights with knight to a4, but black declines and goes to the c4 square, which doesn't actually decline the exchange of the knights, because we can see it here, but we exchange the other knight, and this knight here was a pretty good knight, and this knight here on a5 is going to become good when he jumps to this c5 square, but as we're going to see, it's not going to be such a problem for black. Now we can see knight to c5 immediately, and knight to d6. This knight is probably going to this e4 square. Rook to c1, activating the rook, and now we can see queen to g5. Like we were talking in our previous video about it, in the Carlsbad pawn structure, black attacks on the king side. That's where his pawns are looking at, and that's where he has to play. So he takes action immediately with queen to g5. We can see queen to d1 and h5, taking action. King to h1, rook to e7. Also defending this pawn here on b7, so when the knight moves, this knight can't really take the pawn. That's also one reason for rook to e7. And now we can see knight to d3 back and knight to e4. This is a square for the knight because here it's very useful. Now we can see knight to c5 back, trying to exchange this very good knight, and black declines with knight to d6. With knight to d3, white would probably be happy with a repetition here, but no, black plays queen to f5. Now we can see knight to e5, trying here on this square with the knight, but simply f6, pushing that knight away. Knight to f3, and rook swings to g7. Now knight goes back to h2, and we can see the other rook coming to e8. All the pieces are going towards the king side. That's how it should be. Now we can see king to g1 and knight to e4 back. Queen to f3, trying to exchange queens, but black says no. I'm having an attack here on the king side, and I don't want to exchange queens. After rook f to d1, we can see g5, advancing the pawns. This is also a pawn sacrifice. As you can see, queen takes on h5, and now black is a pawn down, but he's not worried because he's not losing any time. He even did a pawn sacrifice, but it's not such a big deal because after f5, black is really fast here. We can see rook to e1 and g4. Now this queen here looks almost trapped, right? Now as you're going to see, white takes, black recaptures. White's queen doesn't have many squares, so white plays f3, attacking the knight. Okay, black takes the pawn. White can't take it with a pawn, so he takes it with a knight. And we can see rook to h7, attacking the queen. And where is this queen going to go? The only square for the queen, if I see right, is on e5. And now when the queen moves to c8, attacking the queen again, the only square is this square, queen to f4. And now what is black going to play? Rook to f8, attacking the queen again. It goes back again, the only square. And after rook to f5, the queen doesn't have this square here on f4 anymore. It's trapped in the middle of the board. This is very beautiful to see. Really, just knight protects this square, rook protects this square. Everything is protected, so queen is trapped and black won the game. Now I think that it's really useful for you to see as many games on this topic as you can, because like that you're gonna start to get a feeling for this. So guys, I hope that this helps, and I can't wait to see you next time.